Black History Month may be in February, but the important process of learning about history is year-round. With us to discuss the history of La Crosse's African-American community, we have Dr. Richard Breaux, Professor of Race, Gender, and Sexuality at UW La Crosse. Good morning, Dr. Breaux.
Good morning, Alexandra. How are you?
Thanks for being here. Good. So, La Crosse has a fairly problematic history when it comes to race. For people who may not be familiar, what can you tell us about that?
Okay. Many African Americans who came to La Crosse did so in the area either just before or just after the U.S. Civil War. Of course, La Crosse has its context, and so in the state of Wisconsin, Wisconsin was both a place where there was a strong abolitionist sentiment, but there was also resistance to African American equality. It's something that we often confuse. I think often if we think of someone being anti-slavery or opposed to the institution of slavery, we also think that they were for African American equality, but that wasn't the case. And that shows up in a number of places, but especially in the state constitution. It takes basically about 17 years after the state's first constitution for African American male residents of the state to gain the right to vote. Of course, you know, this is put in a national context where within the region, you know, Wisconsin becomes one of the first states to grant African American men the right to vote, but it's certainly not the first in the country. I mean, many of your states in New England and on the East Coast had offered African Americans the opportunity to vote. So there are both employment opportunities as well as then political opportunities in the post-Civil War era. A number of African Americans accompany Wisconsin soldiers and officers from the U.S. Civil War to the city, and they sometimes work for them in various capacities. Some historians make the argument, though, that that employment was in some cases sort of an extended indenture and or mass slavery in the case of children who were brought and then worked in the homes of various whites in La Crosse. And so, but you have that. You have people who are connected to barbering, who are connected to blacksmithing, boot blacking, and of course working as boatmen on and along the Mississippi River. But La Crosse's most problematic history really emerges in the early 20th century as increasingly African Americans are frozen out of employment opportunities. As recent as 2016, La Crosse Mayor Tim Cabot declared that La Crosse had a history of being a sundown town. And essentially sundown towns were cities that barred African Americans from living within the city limits or being within the city limits after sundown, thus the name Sundown Town. But La Crosse then, because of this practice, loses many of its African American residents, and people flee to other parts of the state, sometimes to other states, so that the African American population by say 1915, 1920 is almost non-existent. And sadly, that remains the case where blacks represent less than 1% of the city's population well into the 1990s. And so, you know, the legacy of this is, you know, is that you have a practice of barring African Americans from some opportunities in a place where technically Jim Crow doesn't exist, right? Racial segregation doesn't exist according to the law, but it exists according to practice.
Okay, and so where can people go to learn more about, you know, Black history in La Crosse?
People can, of course, go to the La Crosse County Historical Society, to the La Crosse Public Library. Both of those places have lots of resources. Connected to the La Crosse County Historical Society, of course, is the Enduring Families Project, run by Denise Christie Moss and Rebecca Mormon Krieger.
Okay. All right, and is there a website or anything people can get for that project online?
Yes, I believe you can get to their online information through the La Crosse County Historical Society.
Okay, and tell us, Enduring Families Project, is that?
Yes,
okay.
And it's the Enduring Families Project.
Okay, great. All right, well, Dr. Breaux, thank you so much for sharing some information on this important topic with us.
Thank you very much.